What's up, gamers and geeks? Matt here with That's Fair Podcasting and Gaming Geeks Live. In this video, I'm going to talk about BioWare and what essentially went wrong with them. Now, as a gamer, we all know that BioWare is best known for their single-player, narrative, story-driven RPG, open world, so to speak. And they were known for this from when I found them at about 2003 to about 2010. They were the kings. They were the king of the hill in single-player RPGs. But this last decade has not been good to BioWare, as they went from a fan favorite to more or less forgotten. So I gotta ask, what went wrong with BioWare? Stay tuned. Now, my all-time favorite video game ever is a BioWare video game in 2003's Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And BioWare is probably, in my opinion, single-handedly responsible for the greatest RPG series of video games to ever hit the market. But if you are new here, please feel free to subscribe to That's Fair Podcasting or Gaming Geeks Live. Maybe like the video as you do, help us in that algorithm. I would sincerely appreciate it. And if you don't do any of those and you listen to this video about what I think where BioWare possibly went wrong, thank you so much for sticking with me, and that's what matters the most. Like I said, my actual first BioWare experience is my favorite game to ever play, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic in 2003. And I remember me and my wife, we did a DJing service for this hotel, this big hotel here in Grand Junction. And I remember, it was from about 10 to 1:30 in the morning. And I'd go home and I'd play this RPG. And the next thing I know, the birds are chirping, the sun's coming up, and it only felt like 2 hours. That's how you know a video game actually just captured it. And to me, the BioWare's story that they made for Knights of the Old Republic is par to none the shit that Legends are made of that. I mean, that could have been, Disney who? That actually, if they could have put Revan into a trilogy, I'd have been all over it. They actually tried in video games. Obsidian's follow-up wasn't too bad in 2005's The Sith Lords, KOTOR of the Sith Lords. But it was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic that captured me and set me on my course with BioWare, and why I loved them becoming the greatest RPG video game developing company of all time. At least they were on that trajectory. And in 2005, while Obsidian was working on KOTOR, the Sith Lords, they came out with another new IP called Jade Empire. Now, if you played that, you're like, I think the Spirit Monk, and you're looking, your master disappears, and it's an ancient, fantastical China where there's magic and all that, but it had martial arts, it had BioWare's take on NPCs and the relationships formed with like Silk Fox or Dawnstar and other NPCs. And you had a wonderful experience with this new IP. And it was just, I was waiting patiently. In fact, I recently released a video on video games that should have got a sequel. And Jade Empire, I believe, was my number one of a list of 5. But yeah, I enjoyed Jade Empire. And man, this is like, okay, BioWare can do no wrong, and they did it again. They blew me away in 2009 with the first Dragon Age. They introduce you to you becoming the Grey Warden. And Duncan, at the beginning of the game, you're drinking the blood and you're watching people get ganked by the blood, but those who survive become Grey Wardens. You knew you were going to survive. You knew that was your path. And of course, Duncan ultimately meets his demise, but this opened up a new series in Dragon Age where it had wonderful NPCs as well, like you had Morrigan and Liliana. And I know I'm missing plenty of them here. But again, it was BioWare's take on an open world new IP, RPG, where, you got these relationship systems with these NPCs, and it just didn't get better than that. And it was so awesome. Now, before Dragon Age of 2009, came, and I deliberately kept this one. I deliberately switched the order. 2007's Mass Effect, another new IP. So at this point, you had 3 new IPs by BioWare. They were killing it in the single-player RPG video game world, because the first one was Jade Empire, and now the chronological order was Jade Empire, 2007's Mass Effect, and then 2009's Dragon Age. But let's get back to 2007's Mass Effect. Guys, I don't know about you, but I do know that they literally just took it to all new heights with Mass Effect. It was such a great game. Your Commander Shepard, you got this new crew of, it's a futuristic space one. You got Ashley. You did have Cade Malenko. You had Rex. You had Tali. My all-time favorite NPC of any video game, Garrus Vakarian. I know I'm Rex. I know I'm probably leaving some people out. I don't mean to. I think it was obviously a smaller crew in 2007's Mass Effect. And it broke new ground with an RPG. Even the graphics were just so lifelike. And it was just like you couldn't wait for BioWare to continue this success. And they did. They were just on this, just downhill, not from a standpoint of a lack of success, but that snowball getting bigger because the games are getting better. But if you notice, you go back in 2009's Dragon Age, you're going to see the EA stamp, the EA logo stamped on that. There's your red flag. That's where shit started to hit the fan, man. And again, you had the 2009's Dragon Age, and in 2010, you had probably BioWare's pinnacle game. They hit the apex with their success with Mass Effect 2. The original OG Suicide Squad, and you had a crew of badasses. You even had DLC people like Kasumi and Zaid. But then you had some returns of and Liara from the first one. I am so sorry. That's a big one. You had her in a DLC expansion, Lair of the Shadow Broker, basically in 2010's Mass Effect 2. But you had some return people. You had Garrus, my boy. You had Tali. But then you had new people like Thane, you had Miranda, you had Jack, you had Jacob. I'm leaving people out. You had Morden, you had Grunt. And I know I'm leaving people out, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to. But you had all these wonderful NPCs. But again, the EA logo was stamped on it. And you're like, shit. You already, at this point, the cat was out of the bag that EA had bought them out. And you're like, oh, shit. But these games are kicking ass. But one thing I started to notice after BioWare allowed EA to buy them out, and EA was ensuring that their stamp was first and foremost, you started paying a little more for these games as far as inside purchases with the DLCs, which I was okay with. But again, there was your red flag that BioWare, why did BioWare allow themselves to be bought out by EA? They were doing so well on their own. So you thought, But anyway, after 2010's Mass Effect, you had Dragon Age 2 in 2011. That game felt rushed. Now, that's when, again, in 2010 with Mass Effect 2, they hit the top, and then it started doing this, and the snowball effect from a lack of success. I'm not saying these games bombed because they didn't, but now it started going downhill as far as sales. Dragon Age 2 was solid. It wasn't really something that reached out to you like the first Dragon Age. It felt a lot more linear, and it felt rushed, and you'd come to later to find out that EA wanted it more or less out the door. BioWare had to get it out the door. They did, and it was rushed. Now, in 2012, you had Mass Effect 3, a bookend to a wonderful trilogy. Mass Effect 3 could have been better. But again, you had EA's stamp on it. You had a lot of in-game purchases. This DLC started getting pumped out. As well as I do, it did. And then it brought multiplayer to something that BioWare really wasn't into the multiplayer part of it. And then, of course, EA came along and cha-ching, baby. And again, this was BioWare. Mass Effect 3 was in no shape a failure. In no way, shape, or form was it a failure. It was a highly touted success. But the ending, it left a lot to be desired, which I think why Mike Gamble and Mary DeMarle are heading Mass Effect 5, and hopefully they bring it back into the correct path that it needed to be. But unfortunately, EA still got a stamp on it, so it may never happen. But 2014's Dragon Age Inquisition, would ultimately be, from what we understand, the last time BioWare actually made money on something. That's ugly. And let's be honest, Inquisition wasn't that. Did I say Obsidian? Anyway, I'm so sorry. Dragon Age Inquisition. And I gotta be honest, it didn't feel like a Dragon Age. I played it from start to finish. It was tough, but you know, it didn't really give me that Dragon Age feel. But it did garner enough success to make BioWare money. Now, here's the deal. Did it all begin when EA bought out BioWare? That's the question that needs to be asked. Because the purchase actually happened clear back in 2007 for the price of $860 million. EA would purchase BioWare. Now, I don't know about you, but that's where I think things started to take a shittier turn for BioWare once EA got their hooks in. Because let's be honest, EA is absolute shit when it comes to just fleecing gamers for more and more money as much as they can. Mass Effect Andromeda would come out in 2017. Guys, that game was just horrible. It had a horrible launch. It was wonky as shit. The characters uninspiring. The story sucked. The DLC, where were the Quarians? There was no DLC because there were no Quarians. Now, I don't know about you, but loyal fans played this. I played it all the way through only once. I did not like the Ryder characters. I couldn't get into that story arc with their father, and it just... The graphics I thought were absolute shit. They weren't photorealistic like the first three in the original trilogy, which when they came out with the Legendary Edition in 2021, that might be actually BioWare making some money, but whatever money they made, I think they had to give back to the losses from the, likes of Mass Effect Andromeda, Anthem, and eventually Dragon Age of Belgard. Jesus Christ. But anyway, honestly, Mass Effect Andromeda was just an absolute flop. You could kind of tell going into it, but you stuck with it, and even the multiplayer was absolute dog shit. And again, EA had its stamp on it, and EA basically controlling BioWare, you could feel it in the product at this point. And in 2019, you really felt it in Anthem. I don't see how this was BioWare's idea to try to do an MMO or an online game such as Anthem. I purchased it ready to give BioWare another chance. I thought that their past track record gave them that chance. Anthem, they didn't even continue on it. They didn't keep adding things to it. It's dead in the water where it belongs. It should stay as far down as it can. It should be down there with the likes of the Titanic, because Anthem was absolute shit. We tried it. You played it, and it started getting so repetitive so fast that I never got past 4 or 5 total plays. Me and my wife played it. My boy Atlas in England played it, and some buddies here. We got online together and played it, and it didn't take. And it was an absolute shit show. And I think, again, EA was a main force behind that, which leads to Dragon Age of Belgard in 2024. Guys, we don't really need to even talk about that absolute shit show. Led by Corinne Bush, with the message that the progressive pandering of DEI was more important than making BioWare any money. It was more important to these progressive shitlibs to actually put this shit in the game and preach to you about pronouns and transgendered, and I think everyone in it was pansexual, which is so inorganic. And honestly, guys, I didn't play it. I didn't have to. It was one of those games I watched, I laughed at. I couldn't believe I was actually watching this on these streaming sites. It was just an absolute debacle of just total dog shit. And it deserved Corinne Bush losing their job, even though they I think voluntarily left. He voluntarily left and now works for Wizards of the Coast at Hasbro. They're going to completely fuck up Dungeons and Dragons as much as they can. Hopefully they don't get involved in Baldur's Gate 4, because Baldur's Gate 3 was an absolute masterpiece with organic DEI. It was organic. It's acceptable. But when you force it in a message like Dragon Age of Belgard, you're going to get the outcome that Dragon Age of Belgard got with that absolute shit show and the bomb that it deserved. Now, EA would be bought out very recently by a Saudi Arabia company called Public Investment Fund, Silver Lake Partners, And then Affinity Partners, led by Jared Kushner, who is the son-in-law of President Donald Trump. And the good news about them taking and buying out EA is they may set that shit back on the correct course and actually make this company worth its weight in gold again, because EA was sucking the money. They were fleecing the money out of gamers as much as they could. They were controlling BioWare to just absolutely fleece players in many ways, as well as the direction their games went, where it was very un-BioWare-esque that we were used to from these single-player RPGs that we got from the early 2000s on to about 2010. Now, I'm on Mike Gamble's side, and I am on Mary DeMarle's side, who's a brilliant writer on some of the Deus Exes. They are working on Mass Effect 5, and I'm really hoping for the best here. I will give it a chance. I won't pre-order it, but I'm going to wait till it comes out. I will give Mass Effect 5 a chance when it comes out, if it's able to stand the test of time. If it's not axed. It could be axed. Who knows? I'm hoping it isn't. But guys, anyway, that's really all I have. In closing, it was basically, where did BioWare go wrong? Maybe you guys in the comments section could add where you think BioWare went wrong. I think it's when EA slowly started controlling them more and more. Kind of ironic that in Mass Effect you have them saying, assume control. You know, you have Harbinger saying, assume control. Maybe Harbinger was ultimately EA and BioWare represented Shepard, and maybe it was a hidden message. I don't know, but that's kind of what I'm getting from it. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. Again, please feel free to subscribe to That's Fair Podcasting or Gaming Geeks Live. Like the video. Again, help us in that algorithm. If you don't do any of those, and you watch this video on where BioWare went wrong, that's what means the most. Thank you so much. And again, please add in the comment section where you think BioWare went wrong. But anyway, guys, to all you gamers and geeks out there, all love, and I'm outro.